This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
G7 leaders meeting in the UK adopt a plan to help build infrastructure in developing countries. Africa CDC welcomes donations of COVID-19 vaccines by the United States but cautions on cold storage challenges. And we examine efforts to eliminate child labor in Côte d'Ivoire. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up, after years of armed confrontations in the Sahel, a local official in Burkina Faso tries to talk peace with armed militants. And aid agencies seek to restore water services in Goma after pipelines were damaged during recent volcanic activity. Welcome to the program now. G7 leaders have adopted a plan to help build infrastructure in developing nations. The White House says the U.S.-inspired plan was adopted after President Joe Biden and other G7 leaders discussed ways to counter China's own infrastructure program, the Belt and Road Initiative. Other issues topping today's agenda include economic recovery and COVID-19 vaccines. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said on Friday that the Group of Seven would support multilateralism, adding issues like climate change could not be solved without China.
To be able to meet Joe Biden for the first time is of course something important because he presents and represents the commitment to multilateralism, which we have been lacking in recent years, and that's why we will send a strong message in support of multilateralism. That will of course lead to a confrontation with Russia and in some aspects with China. But then on the other hand, we need everyone in the world. We want to work together, especially in the areas of climate protection and biodiversity. There, we will never achieve solutions without China.
Meanwhile, G7 leaders are pledging to donate 1 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccine doses to other countries. Half will come from the United States. Many praise the move, but some worry it's not enough and may come too late. CGTN's Brian Dorman breaks down the numbers.
As debate over vaccine patent waivers stalls at the WTO, leaders of the world's richest countries say they have a better idea: donating vaccines. U.S. President Joe Biden says he will buy 500 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine and donate them to more than 90 countries. However, more than half of those doses won't be available until early next year. In the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has pledged to donate at least 100 million surplus vaccines. He says about 5 million of those will be available in the coming weeks. The European Union is stepping up too. It aims to donate at least 100 million COVID-19 vaccines by the end of 2021. That includes France and Germany, each pledging to donate 30 million doses each. Italy promising 15 million. Japan says it will donate about 30 million doses produced within the country through the World Health Organization's COVAX initiative, along with Canada. But officials there have not yet made any firm commitment.
In a related development, the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says the United States' planned donation of 500 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines will help achieve the 60% herd immunity targeted on the continent. The organization's director, John Kengasong, has also advised member states to use the expected doses of Pfizer vaccines in major cities due to the strict cold storage needed for those jabs. Here is CGTN's Girum Chala with more details.
As part of U.S. President Joe Biden's initiative to help vaccinate the world against COVID-19, Washington has promised to donate 500 million doses of vaccines to be shared between 100 countries around the world. And Africa, through the Africa CDC, is expected to significantly benefit from this donation.
Of the 500 million doses, 200 million will be available this year. through COVAX, and will include the 92 countries or so that are in the advanced mechanism for COVAX. And then the African Union has been explicitly mentioned in the communique, so we are very grateful for that.
It will be a Pfizer vaccine dose that the U.S. will send to Africa and the rest of the world through this initiative. The Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says due to the strict cold storage requirement for Pfizer vaccines, precautionary measures must be taken to ensure effective utilization of the dose.
You can use them easily in major cities where you have electricity and the minus 80s or 70s deep freezers. And those deep freezers do not cost excessively, they are not excessively expensive. With $10,000 to $12,000, you can get a minus 70 or 80 degrees. And that one of them can store up to about 300,000 doses of vaccine. So I think it's a question of having the vaccines in a timely and predictable manner. That way we can plan. Planning is key in any scale-up or vast vaccination program.
Africa has planned to vaccinate at least 60% of the 1.3 billion people in the continent to guarantee herd immunity against COVID-19. And the Africa CDC Director, John Nkengasong, says the U.S. vaccines donation will be instrumental in trying to achieve that goal.
We have to use a combination of vaccines to win this battle against the COVID-19. So if the Pfizer doses start coming in, our advice to member states will be to prioritize major cities. Then as other vaccines like Johnson & Johnson start arriving, because you can easily store them at ordinary refrigerator, you can expand them to the more challenging areas or remote areas.
Currently, Africa has faced significant vaccine shortages, making its goal of winning the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic a much more difficult task. But the continent is hopeful that with its hundreds of millions of Johnson & Johnson vaccines orders in the pipeline and many more jobs from other sources such as the Chinese government donations, it will soon hit the 60% vaccination target. CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
French troops have killed a senior member of Al-Qaeda during a military operation in Mali. This is according to the French Armed Forces Minister. According to Florence Parly, French troops foiled a planned attack on a UN compound in northern Mali. 4 terrorists were allegedly killed, including Bai Bakabo. Bakabo is a senior member of Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. The group has been responsible for several killings and kidnappings in the Sahel.
On the 5th of June, Barkhane forces detected a planned attack on a UN compound in Al-Gahok in northern Mali. An operation was then very swiftly launched against an armed terrorist group, which was preparing to unleash mortar fire on this post, occupied by the Chadian battalion of a UN mission. This operation led to the killing of 4 terrorists. Among them was Bai Bakabo, a senior member of Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb.
Meanwhile, France's foreign minister has visited Burkina Faso. Jean-Yves Le Drian's visit comes as the country deals with the aftershocks of a militant attack which killed at least 132 people. The attack was the deadliest Burkina Faso has seen in recent history. Le Drian also looked to reaffirm France's commitment to supporting the country's fight against terrorism. President Emmanuel Macron announced plans on Thursday to reduce the number of French troops in the Sahel. France currently has over 5,000 in the region.
Before flying back to Paris, I thought it was absolutely necessary to stop here first to give France's condolences to President Kabore and our sympathy for the Burkinabe people following this carnage that the population of Solhan had to experience. We want to show the Burkina authorities our friendship, our affection, and our determination to continue to work together against the poison that is terrorism. The fight against terrorism remains part of our priorities, even though the Barkhane model is no longer adaptable. We want to have consultations in order to try and transform this model into a model which is less about a territorial footprint of French forces and more about support towards forces of the affected countries.
Now, for many years, West African armies and their international allies have waged a strong campaign against Islamist militant groups active in the Sahel region. A local official in Burkina Faso is now trying to use diplomacy to negotiate peace with the militants. Jane Keo now reports.
Adama Ouadraogo is the deputy mayor of Thiao town, located in Burkina Faso's porous border with Mali. 2 years after Thiao town was devastated by jihadist violence, Adama and a group of volunteer fighters traveled to a militant encampment to attempt to negotiate peace.
The men who are in this crisis, we all know each other. But these 12 and 13-year-olds, they don't know anyone. And if they grow up in this violence, with this state of mind, it will be very difficult to bring them back to their senses. The crisis might never end in Burkina Faso. These kids have become like animals. They are the real monsters that live in the forest.
The government did not ask us to talk to these people, but they are not against it because they haven't stopped us from doing the work. The day they say they are against it, we'll stop doing it. But what we want is for the government to support the people, because from time to time, the mayors have to help us with petrol discreetly.
By February, only 2 months after Ouadraogo's first meeting, the pair had struck a truce with the militants. The meeting has eased the flow of trade in Thiao. Thousands of displaced people have also returned to the town.
Now, calm has returned, and that's why I came back. I started to work a bit, and there are a lot of customers who come.
While a sense of normalcy has largely returned to Thiao, the town is still haunted by the memories of its previous violence. Residents, however, hope that the peace and stability will prevail in Thiao town. Jane Keo, CGTN.
Well, let's bring you some distressing news just in from the Euro 2020 football tournament, where Danish player, midfielder Christian Eriksen, has collapsed on the field during Denmark's game with Finland. The incident happened as Finland were preparing to take a throw-in. Players rushed to his rescue, with the referee eventually stopping the game for the Inter Milan player to receive treatment. So far, not much is known about his condition. The match, which was the first for both teams in the tournament, has now been suspended. We will, of course, continue to update you on this developing story later in the bulletin and during our Sports Scene program at 1800 GMT. Well, it's time for us to take a quick break. Here is what's still ahead on the program. We examine efforts to eliminate child labor in Côte d'Ivoire. And aid agencies seek to restore water services in Goma after pipelines were damaged during recent volcanic activity.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's take you to Côte d'Ivoire now, where the government has warned locals against employing children to work in the cocoa fields. CGTN's Astatal reports.
The Ivorian government has prohibited children from being employed in cocoa fields. Authorities in the country have initiated operations to track down all those who exploit children in the fields.
Taking a minor child from one area to another to work is intolerable. If a person is found guilty of imposing dangerous work on his or her children, he or she will suffer the full rigor of the law.
Authorities say they have since discovered that most of the children being exploited in cocoa plantations in Côte d'Ivoire come from neighboring Burkina Faso and Mali.
I'm removing the garbage around the cocoa beans. I asked my little brothers to come and help me because they'd come back from school earlier than expected because the teacher is absent. So I preferred to keep them busy this way to avoid them going out for a walk.
In 2018, the Children of Africa Foundation provided the Subre region with a reception center for child victims of trafficking and exploitation. This aimed at helping reduce the cases of child labor in the region.
We want to get the children out of the trafficking or labor situation they are in. By keeping them in this center, we offer them the opportunity to go back to school or to learn a trade that is much easier to do. For example, here we teach them rabbit breeding, snail breeding, hairdressing or sewing. This will allow them to have a good economic situation when they leave the center. It keeps them busy and all their rights are respected.
According to the International Cocoa Initiative Foundation, nearly 1.56 million children work in West Africa's cocoa fields. Some studies show that the state of the roads and the distance from schools is one of the reasons why many children stay in the cocoa fields with their parents. To prevent this, the Ivorian government is working to build new schools closer to camps and villages. Astatal, CGTN.
Let's turn to the DRC, where Goma residents continue to deal with the aftermath of a volcanic eruption. Access to clean water is among the pressing concerns. The UN's Children's Fund is working with partners to restore water supply for around 200,000 people. The eruption of Mount Nyiragongo melted water pipes and damaged a major reservoir. UNICEF and other aid organizations are supporting the state-owned water company in its efforts to restore the water supply. Well, earlier we talked to Raphael Tino, the head of the ICRC sub-delegation in Goma, about the situation on the ground. Here is what he had to say.
It's important to understand what happened exactly with this eruption. The lava flow destroyed some pipes, some water pipes that were critical, and heavily damaged one reservoir. And this entire system, pipes and reservoir, was supplying more than half of the population of Goma with water, namely 550,000 people. Shortly after that, the local water authorities, the Régie des Eaux, managed to make a bypass, what we call a bypass, in the pipes and restore the water supply for about 400,000 people, which is amazing and has to be put at the credit of the authorities. This, however, left around 150,000 people without access to potable water. That in the east of the city. Not only the places that the lava had touched, but the entire east and center of the city was deprived of water. So that's one first element. Then the second one is that some people were displaced from this eastern part of the city to the western part, where the water is also scarce, and they put additional strain on already scarce water resources for themselves, for the local population, the host communities. And then a third element is that people left the city to different areas, especially to Sake, a city more in the west, and then also the water is extremely scarce, and there they also were faced with a dire lack of water. So hundreds of thousands of people were facing and have been facing shortage of potable water. And obviously this is a major problem because obviously water is indispensable for life, but it's also one of the pillars of public health, because without potable water, the risk of the outbreak of diseases, waterborne diseases such as cholera, is much higher. So there are always several phases in a crisis like this. The first phase obviously is the emergency. The emergency aims at helping people survive. So this reservoir that we restored, and this water trucking that we are processing is an emergency step. We also have other emergency operations. We provide water to hospitals, we provide water to the prison, we provide water to more rural areas outside the city of Goma. We also provide fuel for the pumping stations, so water keeps flowing in the pipes. All that is a temporary measure to make sure that we have the time to work on a more sustainable and more durable solution, which is repairing the water system. And of course, this is much more time-consuming, more resource-consuming, and for that, the ICRC, the Federation, the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, the Congolese Red Cross, and the authorities are devising different options.
Now, Egypt is known around the world for its cultural heritage and history of pharaohs, pyramids, and the mythical Sphinx. Millions of tourists regularly flock to the famous Giza pyramids and its museums to catch a glimpse of these ancient wonders. Well, now they have a chance to take a piece of ancient Egypt home with high-quality replicas being made in the country. Astatal tells us more.
With a delicate hand, artists at the Kunuz factory create life-size pharaonic busts. The replicas can go for as much as $12,748. Each replica receives a stamp from the High Council of Antiquities.
Our product is a copy of the original artifact. They are made with high-quality materials. We have an example such as this one, and Anubis, a copy such as this one. It holds the stamp from the High Council of Antiquities, a barcode, and then there's a certificate that states this is an exact copy of the original artifact. This is unavailable in ordinary Egyptian markets or with things that are sold in commercial markets.
Making high-quality pieces is something the artists here pride themselves on.
Of course, it makes me sad seeing low-quality replicas, because it is my job. When I see something that isn't well done, I notice immediately, and this feeling is internal. So when I came here, I saw things were entirely different. Things here are original. You are producing something original, and you produce it with love. That is what matters.
The 10,000 square meter Kunuz factory was inaugurated in March by the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. Many of the replicas made here have been sold to the Egyptian Museum of Civilization. This project is part of Egypt's plans to revive the tourism sector. Astatal, CGTN.
Right, and here's what's coming up. In sports, Italy kicks off its UEFA Euro 2020 campaign with a 3-0 win over Turkey. Well, let's bring you back to the update from our breaking news from the Euro 2020 tournament, where Danish captain Christian Eriksen had earlier collapsed on the pitch during Denmark's Euro 2020 Group B game with Finland.